Welcome back to Development Dynamics DD with MaqC. My name is MaqC and I'm your host for this incredible program where we listen to stories of stalwarts, especially in the social impact development space. And by now we've realized from the various stories and from the various guests that we have here that varies. There is a huge range of who those are. And today, in studio, we are joined by a renowned leader in the legal space. He's not just winning in cases, and he's also pushing and paving the way for justice in the Kenyan courtroom. But most importantly, he also uses his time to give to the next generation, to support and tackle issues to do with community leadership, identity, personal branding. He has a lovely initiative that is called Taifa Teule that mentors young people and provides them with the tools to advocate for themselves, advocate for the kind of future that they want. So Ranja, it's been karibu sana.
Thank you, thank you.
It has been a while this coming. So first of all, I just must say thank you and apology for, I think we've shifted this, three, four times,
Yeah,
and you've been very kind and very understanding. It does take a lot to ensure that we can be all prepared. I keep saying I'm a willing listener to your story, and you're a willing seller of your story. So just ensuring that we are all in the right frame of mind and in the right environment for that to happen. You've been very gracious for that. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Karibu sana.
Yes.
I would wish that we start with Ranja's roots. Where do you, or what are your roots? Where do you come from?
Well, I could start with my parents' roots.
Fantastic.
My dad is from Gatundu South.
Ah, all right. Which was previously in Thika district.
Yes.
Now in Kiambu County.
Correct.
Right.
And my mom's from Gatundu North.
Okay. Oh,
yes.
So just across the road.
Yes. So yes, I guess they crossed a river or two, and yes, and they met.
Met each other.
Yeah, but so because of our African traditions, when I'm asked where I'm from Gatundu South, where Dad is from.
Right.
But then I was born when we were living in Uthiru.
Okay.
Uthiru, just up Wayaki Way. So that's also a bit of where I'm from. And we lived there for maybe about the first 11 years of my life before we moved to Kiambu Road, just Kiambu Road, a place called Thinda. And so Thinda has been home. It is still home where my mom lives. When my dad passed on, that's where he's buried. So I think for the short answer is I'm from Kiambu.
And I love that you mention where you're from is largely where your parents are from.
Yeah.
Let's get to know them a little more. So your dad and your mom, what did they do for a living? And as they came to meet, how many are you in your family? That context.
Okay. Yeah, so Dad is now deceased, but he worked in government for a long time. He trained as I think it was a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry.
Nice.
And then
at that time, I'm sure there were just very few.
Very few at the University of Nairobi. I think there were probably 1970. The guys who entered UON in 1970, that's the University of Nairobi. And so they were really the first indigenous, among the first indigenous cohort, because it became University of Nairobi in 1969, so, or thereabouts. So, and then after that, he went to Australia, I think Sydney, and studied a master's in food science or something like that. And then came back, worked at City Hall, worked for, I don't know what it was called then, but it's now Kengen.
Right.
Because he used to go to Naivasha a lot.
Quite.
And I'm told when I was a baby, I used to call it Naishava. So they were doing the geothermal then. I think the very early wells, they did that. Then I think he had a stint at government chemist, then worked at Kenya Industrial Research Institute called KIRDI, because that's where they used to do a lot of food science. There was a lot of research, processing technologies. Basically, I think it was Kenya's early journey with innovation and science and research and those kind of things. And then he ended up working in mainstream government in the Ministry of Research, and when retired as Director of Research. So he really did well in government, rose through the ranks. Mom, on the other hand, was a teacher all her life. When I was born, she was teaching, and she taught for 30 years, mainly at a school called Visa Oshol Primary School in Westlands. Yes, so she retired as a teacher, and is still around teaching, helping on boards, just doing stuff in the community and counseling now. So yeah, so that's.
And what born are you?
I am the firstborn. We're 4 boys.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so no girls.
Yeah.
All the girls in the family, we've brought them. Yeah, so.
And your parents are very happy for that.
Yes, yes, because they waited for a girl for the longest time, and it was one of those, a newborn comes, you're like, hey, it's a boy.
Is there a huge distance in terms of age between yourself and spacing between you and the rest of the siblings?
No, we're like it's about 3 years, roughly 3 years difference. Yes, so I have a younger brother, Philip, who follows me 3 years after, and then 3 years behind him, someone else, and then the last one 3 years. So the gap is, total gap between us is like 9-10 years. Yeah.
9-10 years.
Yeah.
Did you grow close when you were growing up?
Yes, quite, because I think we were a close-knit family. Dad was very present. In fact, I think I grew up very sheltered, because it's only now in adulthood when I met people whose dads were not present, or maybe even in teens, and you go to the, in the estate, you go to someone's house and, their dad is never there, those kind of things. So for us, Dad was always present and was always home by 6. So yeah, so if he was late after 6, and everyone gets worried for where is Dad, and those kind of things. So I think because of my dad was very intentional about being present, and of course Mom was also very intentional. So we grew up very close knit. Dinner table, everyone on board together
regularly.
Yes, every day.
Every day. Wow.
Every day. And on the weekends, it's it's breakfast, it's lunch, it's dinner. So yeah, we grew up pretty close. Of course, with typical squabbles of siblings, but yeah.
And what kind of firstborn were you? Like, were you the hawk who's looking after his younger ones, or are you the mchochi?
I've sort of always been toe the line kind of person. Yeah. And so my brothers told me I was very strict. And they don't even need to tell me. I know. I was strict. I was tough. I was the deputy parent for them. And I think at some point I was really tough. Like I'd even chopper. I had powers to discipline at some point.
Yeah, because also parents expect that the firstborn is able to demonstrate, to the rest how life is. Yeah.
Yes, and I think also my personality, choleric, so really tough. It took a while for me. It actually took me going to boarding school in high school. And I missed them so much, and I realized, wow, I'm really harsh. I need to calm down. I need to, just so. And then I realized when I walk into the room when we were older, they'd keep quiet because, I have parent energy. But then they were telling stories, and they were laughing before I walked into the room. So I realized I sort of need to, So that was, I think I was a good boy, but also a tough firstborn.
So you're growing up in Thinda.
Thinda, yes.
From what age were you there, and how was your experience both in the neighborhood and in school?
So when we moved to Thinda, I was 11. This is back in 1989. So first, it was a fantastic experience for us because our parents had just built a house, bought a plot and built a house. Remember, I said we were close-knit, so we were very were involved in just the process. Remembering seeing the house drawn on a map, to then, you know, just seeing it going up and seeing all the cement work and the construction works, and then eventually just coming into this. So it was a big deal for us. And Thinda back then was largely a coffee estate.
Yeah. As was most of Kiambu.
Yes. So it had transitioned from the old Mzungu owners to now a Kenyan-run company with farmers who now control, and shareholders who control the company. So there was just, it was sparsely populated, so there were just a few plots around the coffee estate. So we didn't have many neighbors, and there tended to be two categories of neighbors. So there was the middle class neighbors like us, whose your parents have bought a plot and built a house. And then there was the neighbors whose parents maybe, who were workers in the coffee estate.
Right.
So there was that sort of a class distinction. So I think naturally we tended to hang out with the neighbors who had, you know, were middle class upbringing. Because then your kids, so, you know, we had a black and white TV, the neighbors have a color TV, so you want to go and watch the color TV those days. I mean, that's telling you how old I am.
Yeah.
But it was a nice sort of comfortable place. You could just bunch up together and go watch a movie in someone's house, the ones who had a video cassette recorder and those kind of things. Or the guys who had bikes, now you go to their houses and do that. And of course, when you are older, you start noticing the girls and you start, you know, going to, you know, taking yourself to try and be useful in other people's homes so that you can say hello to the girls. But I think it was just a nice, comfortable upbringing, not too dramatic. Again, I said middle class family, so I lived in Kiambu, but I studied in Westlands.
Yes, that distance,
yes.
The commute, daily commute.
Yeah.
That's for you and your siblings?
Yes, for all of us. I mean, Dad was working in the Central Business District. Mom was...
So they would drive you to school?
Yes. And we were learning in the school where my mom was teaching.
So it only made sense.
Yes, it just made sense to go that way. Yes.
All four of you, right?
Yes. We all four of us started there, but I think the last two did not finish there. They moved to other schools. Yeah. So I always say I grew up in Kiambu, but I didn't have a Kiambu life. I had a Nairobi life. Yeah.
And what were your interests at that time? Like, as you're growing up, what's catching your attention in terms of like how life is? What are you noticing? What are you starting to be conscious about?
Interestingly, I was a weird kid. I liked history and government.
Interesting.
This is
history and civics.
Yes,
used to call it,
yes, history, civics, anything government. This is back in
the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, when I was 8 years old.
Oh wow!
So I was this kid who was really interested in like reading the newspaper. Like, you know, would share the newspaper with my dad. Like he'd get one page, I get one page, and I'm reading, and I'm asking questions. When I was specifically, I remember 8 years old, standard 2. So in Visa Oshwal, we used to have prizes for the guys who, at the end of the year, the top 10, the top 10 students, and the prize was a token to go. You could take to textbook, a book, a sort of voucher.
A voucher, yeah.
Yeah, you could take to textbook center and buy yourself something. So the three things I wanted was an Oxford set, because my dad would never buy an Oxford set.
They would buy the
buffer and the coffer. Yes. But the Oxford was, you know, and it was also exciting because it was mine.
Yeah.
I got it
you
myself.
had worked it.
Yes. And then what was the other thing? I liked to a bit of painting and coloring, so I'd buy myself a set of paints, and then a book about Kenyatta or Mau Mau or just the independence struggle. That standard 2. So that was yeah. So I just found it so fascinating. So by the time I was, you know, like in my early teens, 13, 14, I knew so much about Kenya's history. I discovered a stash of weekly reviews that my dad used to have. So there was this magazine.
From the newspaper?
Yes. No, there's this magazine which used to be run by Dr. Hilary Ngweno.
Yeah.
And it was
Former
called the weekly.
media mogul somewhere.
Yes. And then it was a Red magazine. I think they've also brought it back in the Sunday. It's sort of an insert these days. But those days it was like the premier political political analysis
columns and
yes, weekly. So I discovered a stash my dad had from 1979 to 1985. I read them all. Yes, so I knew crazy stuff like who was a councillor when, who was Andrew Gomba, who was Nathan Kahara, people, like I couldn't even have conversations with my peers because no one even knows what was that. So much so that later, when there was, I think many years later, when there was a series on the TV called Makers of a Nation by the same Hilary Ngweno guy, I think it was on NTV.
Yeah, voiced by a lovely lady's voice. I think she was called Lorna Dias.
Yes.
Who had a very squawky voice.
Yes.
Yeah.
I could sort of mouth whatever she was saying because I knew, because it was based a lot on Weekly Review and the history that I used to. So I knew all those stuff. I knew
a lot of your dad is rubbing off on you.
Yes.
Because, I mean, in your description, he's the one who, you know, worked in government and he's the one piecing these things together.
That's true. And we also then, because of that, we had a lot of conversations with him.
Yeah.
Like we'd sit and talk about, and I'd ask questions about how government works, the role of a minister, and especially when he was mainstream government, because he was really near the top, so he'd work a lot with the permanent secretary, as they were called then, yeah, and then the ministers who are the CS now. So I was a very interested kid who was very interested in governance, history, government, and those kind of things.
Any particular finding that astounded you pretty much that you would say was like an aha moment?
About government?
Yeah, in your inquiry about the past of Kenya and the history and what we've come, was there that thing that you're like, oh, I observed this in part of a story somewhere that shaped maybe a bit of your thinking, or like was just an aha for you?
Well, there were several. The one that I can think of right now is reading about Jomo Kenyatta because I think we know about Jomo Kenyatta, the president. Yes, and the Mzee, and you know, and there's all, depending on what side of you know, what your history is, you have good ideas or bad ideas about him. But when I think about Jomo Kenyatta, the young man who was probably in his mid-30s when he went to the UK for the first time. And you know, I try to think about it. So here he is. He was working for the Kikuyu Central Association, as it was then known. Yeah. KCA before it became something, KAU. Before it became, Kenya African Union.
Yeah.
And KCA, I think, brought him in because he was literate, and then he was helping them to edit a publication they had called Mwigwithania. And I think then they decided this guy seems to understand these things, he can talk, he's literate, so let's send him to the UK to go and agitate, to convince these people that, you know, we want our land back, to, you know, to talk on our behalf.
Go and do some lobbying and policy, I mean, advocacy work.
Yes. So now think about Jomo Kenyatta then. He's not educated in policy work, lobby. You're working in under a colonial regime where you have been, you know, really put down.
Suppressed.
But then now you're going to, you take I guess it was a train ride to Mombasa, then take a ship.
for a number of days.
Yeah, probably weeks.
Yeah.
To the UK.
Jesus, that I hadn't actually thought that would be how they were getting there.
Yeah, and then so I imagine Jomo Kenyatta landing somewhere at a port in the UK, and this is his first now experience abroad, Maju for us. And like, where do you start? Like, if I told you you need to go and talk to Joe Biden now, yeah, like, where do you start? Who do you talk to? So I always wondered, how did he start? Like, is the culture shock for him? He's staying in this foreign country, learning the mannerisms. You've just come from, Kenya, so there's not much. There's no TV, so you don't really know. Now you have observed a bit of Western culture, so then you know stuff about. So you know what
to expect.
What to expect. The food. So you're learning. Everything is new.
Green.
Completely green. But you're going to, back in Kenya, there is a colonial government that is, there's a, structure all the way to the governor who are big shots. But then now you're in UK where you have the boss of the governor who is the colonial secretary, who is the cabinet secretary in the ministry, in the government of the United Kingdom, the empire. And here is little Jomo Kenyatta, then called Johnston Kamau, who's going to...
That is true. At times we forget even his name. Forget the man.
Yeah. Who's going to engage with these people. Like, where do you start? There's no force of an organization behind you. You're just trying to figure out, okay, who do I talk to? Where you're knocking on doors and, you're being rejected because who are you? So when I think of that journey,
is interesting.
I wish someone would tell that story of just what was the experience of him learning, growing, meeting people, trying to convince a few people. By the time he then got access to someone to hear him, and then maybe talked to a few MPs, started writing letters, started giving public lectures. So just the sheer effort just made me really respect them.
And the truth is, even as you just say about that, the reason he's going there is to advocate for, like, less colonial practices and eventually, hopefully, no colonial practices.
Yeah.
But it's, as with every other advocacy journey, and as with every other thing that you're pushing for change, it takes a while.
Yes.
In this case, for him, it took a while just to travel.
Yes.
It took a while to know which door to knock. It took a while for him to have audience.
Yes.
Very intriguing indeed.
To the point where he even now realized, okay, for me to be able to negotiate with these guys, I need to up my education.
Right.
So then ended up, going to school.
There.
Yes. And doing the stuff that he did. And then even writing the book, Facing Mount Kenya. It was part of him building his profile to be able to now project. Yes.
And get better audience.
Yes. And still struggling with life. He's a man. He's, he's broke. He had his issues. He's met some white woman. He's married her. There's a world war going on.
Yeah.
Yes, because this is in the middle of smack in the middle of World War II.
Actually,
90, well, not smack. Well, he was there from 33 but 39, just experiencing all those cultures, moving to Denmark, moving to Russia, coming back to the UK. So just thinking of that Jomo Kenyatta has really inspired me, made me think, okay, that guy really was really passionate about what he was doing, and he had a huge vision of something that looked to the rest of people was completely impossible. So
and he navigated it.
Yes.
And gave us independence.
Yes.
Or was part of
was part of the journey.
Of the journey.
Yeah.
Very nice. And it's interesting to hear that a bit of that is where you're also getting your inspiration from. At that time, did you know what you wanted to be, or did you have particular dreams of I think my future is going to look like this?
I think the first time, when you're a kid, you want to be a policeman, then you want to be a driver.
They changed quite a bit.
But I think when I was then in maybe around standard 5, maybe around 11, 12, I met an uncle who was a lawyer. I had an uncle who I then realized was a lawyer. And he just made me think, okay, being a lawyer is, looks like it's interesting. But a bit later into my teens, as I continued reading about, world affairs and stuff, Bill Clinton became president. He was a lawyer.
That time, yeah,
yes,
exactly.
He was a lawyer. Nelson Mandela, a lawyer. I think Al Gore, who was Bill Clinton's vice president. A few years later, Tony Blair becomes Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He's a lawyer. So I started thinking, okay, yes, I like politics, I like government, so maybe I should do law. Yeah, so that's.
So it wasn't a hard decision.
Yes, it wasn't really hard.
Things were just adding up, and your interests were aligning very well.
Yes.
And all these world factors are also.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm curious. You then, what was school like for you? Did you, were there extracurricular things that you would do? And given that you're in the same school that your siblings are, but also your mom is a teacher, how was the experience for you in terms of just shaping you as a young man then?
So Visa Osho Primary was interesting because it was. The Osho community had partnered with the government. So I think the government provided land and the Osho community built the structure. So it was sort of a public, what we call now public-private partnership, but it was run as a government school. So it was half the population was Asians, yeah. And the other half is
the name.
Yes, African. So it was an interesting, culturally diverse space to grow in, because you're meeting Asian students pupils who they eat chevra. You've never heard what chevra is. Those kind of things. You're learning some of their language. They are struggling with Kiswahili. You're struggling with some. So it was an interesting space to grow up in. It helped that I was an A student, so top student. So that was a feel-good thing for me. When I went to high school, things went upside down. So
we'll hear about that.
Yeah, but in primary school, it was good to compete for the top. I was So that was, I think that was
extracurriculars.
Extracurricular. Well, we used to swim, so I learned how to swim there. When I was in the lower primary, I wasn't really good at stuff. But I do have a memory of a sports day when I was competing spoon and marble. Where you put the spoon in the marble and try to balance it. And I was supposed to be fast, but my marble fell on the line and I cried my lungs out. But then when I was older, I think because I was an early bloomer physically, and now in my pre-teens, I became taller and physically much stronger than my classmates. So I ended up being athletics champion, 100-meter champion, 200-meter champion, 400-meter champion.
Okay. So that's pretty much a very all-round student.
Yes.
Yeah, faring well in class, but also faring well in the field.
Yes, yes, with the help of the early blooming. And I think, so back when I was in class 1, probably very early in the year, standard 1, we used to have Fridays. I don't know whether you remember, we used to have Friday assembly. There was a flag raising. So I observed that and I saw, some guy raising the flag, and then I realized that's the head boy. And when I was in standard 1, I decided one day I will be the head boy.
Oh, okay.
Because I liked that thing. It looks nice and powerful. Remember,
it actually is. So I suspect you were a scout at some point.
I wanted to be, but I never got the uniform, so it didn't work out. I tried, but I made sure you
became the head boy.
And there was a way to do it, because I realized we used to have school prefects appointed from class 5.
Yeah.
So
upper primary.
Yes. So class 5, class 6, class 7, class 8. So I made sure I positioned and angled and did everything necessary to get myself appointed prefect, so that I had an early start in standard 5.
And it happened.
Class 6 prefect, class 7 senior prefect, class 8 head boy. So that was, I guess,
a good way to complete, and it's merited. So it's a good way to complete your primary school. Your choice of high school?
So I went to Starehe Boys.
So this was because that's what you had chosen as your first choice.
Yes. I had a cousin who was a bit older than me who went to Starehe. And I really looked up to him. He was like he's like the the firstborn cousin, the eldest cousin in the extended family. So yeah, I really looked up to him, and he told me about Starehe, and he told me it's a national school, it's really good, and of course you get to hear that it's it's competing with Alliance. So I think early on and I think someone advised me that everyone competes for Alliance. So Starehe is just as good, at least we thought, and and it used to really was really up there. So yeah, early on I just said I want to go to Starehe, but because of my grades, teachers and relatives used to say, no, you should choose Alliance. I was like, no.
The top schools were then Mangu, Alliance, Starehe,
Strathmore.
And Strathmore. Those were sort of like, you have to be. You're saying there was a shift in terms of, like performance for, number one top position? Is that because then you get into like an Ivy League situation where everyone is just bright? Yeah.
So that's the thing. So, you come into Starehe. So I knew from early on, Starehe is my choice. I don't want to, and I've always been, I think from my young age, I don't like the idea of shooting to the stars, shooting for the stars to get to the moon. I'm like, let's just shoot for the moon.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's where I want to go.
We have a target.
Yes.
Let's achieve it.
Yeah, so for me, Starehe was it. And then, so I get there, top student, index 2 from primary school. And don't forget, my mom was there in school, so I had a lot of support. Although it was weird to have mom also there. As you grow older,
especially as you grow older, it
becomes embarrassing to have mom who's insisting that you must eat githeri while your friends are eating fries and stuff. And back just a quick one, an experience in primary school which wasn't so nice, having mom in school because if you end up doing something naughty or mess up in school, you get beaten by your class teacher or the head teacher, and then mom gets to hear about it, so she does her own chapa.
In school still?
Yes, but
as a teacher?
Yes, no, in the evening now when people have gone home, but you stayed, you're doing homework with mom, so she makes sure she pinches you a bit, and she is the way she used to pinch the inside of the thighs and lift you nicely.
Yay.
Yes.
Wow.
And then, but then now we go home and she tells dad that this one embarrassed me. He was beaten by the class teacher, then he was taken to the head teacher. Head teacher, chapered him, and I have chapered him, and now it's your turn. So when you were having a bad day,
it was bad everywhere.
There, from morning up to up to the time you go to sleep. So so that was sort of that was the rough side of having mom there, but it was also very nice to because a lot of support. But then I go into Starehe, and then now you find index ones from every top school, and also remember I was long jump, high jump, 100-meter champion in primary school. Then you discover you're a softie because you go to high school and you meet guys who are yes, guys from certain parts of Kenya where you have muscle. So both academically and
there's just serious competition.
Yes, so I think the first time I was in a class of 30, I was near number 30, was in Form 1. Yes, and it was a serious reality check for me because like, okay, you're not the
What does that do to Ranja with, like, as you say, reality check, but what's that doing to you? Is it making you question?
Yes, definitely. It was very confusing. It really hit my self-esteem, at least in Form 1, Form 2, because I'm like, what's happening? I'm good at this, I'm sharp. But then it just wasn't working. And, we'd have exams, like end of term exams, end of year exams in Starehe, Form 1, Form 2. And, I remember getting a 6% in mathematics, and
something that you don't quite expect.
It has never happened. So that was quite a shock.
What's your mom saying? What are your folks saying at this time?
I think they gave me space. They were like, you'll find your way, you'll find your way. So I sort of recovered and got into the middle space. So in the middle of the class, middle of the, the stream. And that's where I stayed for a long time. And it's interesting, they never really commented. I think they just trusted me for, just do you do you. So that was my life in Starehe. And, I was a boarder. No, I was a day scholar in Form 1 and Form 2.
Oh, and then you boarded.
And then I became the last 2 years I was a boarder. So that was an interesting space. Yeah.
You had a choice for subjects to pick. It was automatic that you would take history and civics, I assume. It
would have been, but then I remember that thing for shooting for the moon, not the stars. So I figured if I'm going to study law, there is a certain cutoff I need to arrive at or to attain. And so the easiest way to do that was to choose social ethics instead of history. And social ethics was a breeze.
It was quite easy.
Total notes for a whole year were like, 30 pages or 40 pages. So that was a clean A. So that's the strategy.
A good strategy.
So I did social ethics and I liked business. I think business education. And then 3 sciences, So I didn't choose the history and the civics, mainly because I think history also had an aspect of the agrarian revolution, which I didn't like that part. So I was like, okay, let me not gamble with the A. Let's focus.
Let's secure an A in social ethics, and then we add the rest.
Exactly.
And that's what happened.
Yes. So Starehe was an interesting space. So I remember I struggled, but then, and I really struggled all the way up to Form 4. But then I think when I was in Form 4, I decided, okay, this is it. If I'm going to become a lawyer, we have to secure minimum A- overall. And so I got serious. My first term was a joke. I ended up being index 152 out of 200. Yes.
Okay.
So and I hid that index from my parents because they didn't know until when they knew, they got shocked at some point, but it was too late.
You're already probably getting into your mocks.
Yes. But then I remember telling them, guys, I got this. I know what I want. I don't even want an A. I want an A-. And I know why. I've calculated. I know A- is what will get me where I want to go. And I know exactly how I'm going to achieve it. So, but second term, third term, I got down to it. And
that's good. I think being a firstborn, it was probably also a good way to encourage your siblings to, follow this route.
Well, yes, but I hope. But I think the brother who was following me has had a different academic route. He struggled a lot with his grades in primary, but I think he probably had some undiagnosed mild dyslexia. So he was a very sharp kid, but would struggle, would see an N instead of a U, see an M instead of a W.
Interesting.
And so because he struggled with that, academically, those were completely worlds apart. In fact, I feel that in high school, I empathized with him because I realized, so this is how it feels to be at the back of the class. So for a long time, he was at the back of the class. Things only tipped now when he grew up and he got launched into his career and he did so well. But it's because he learned, I think he discovered how he learns.
How he learns,
Yes.
Very interesting. Very, very, very interesting.